response.
Well, Skip, I'm not surprised that there was a smattering of boos. I mean, I think we kind of expected that, especially. I'm not so sure, Skip, if James Harden would have handled this thing in a gentleman's fashion, if he had played as hard as he could, but behind the scenes says, guys, I want you to get me out. I'm not so sure that he still wouldn't have gotten some boos. But I thought it was a nice gesture by the Houston Rockets to let bygones be bygones. This guy did give us 8 great years of service to this organization. He's been a pillar in the community. He's still helping with some of the victims that was affected by the storm. And so, you know what? James Harden has earned that right. And I know people are like, well, what are you honoring him for? He hadn't won anything. He didn't hang any banners. Yeah, but we got to get away from, unless you win a championship, you shouldn't be worthy of being honored in an organization. I think James Harden is more than worthy of being honored. So, Skip, I like the gesture of them honoring him, video tribute up on the screen to say, James, we appreciate what you did while you were here. We know you played hard with the exception of the 9 games this year, that notwithstanding, but the previous 7.5, 8 years, we're not going to let 2 weeks, 3 weeks of bad blood ruin the 8 previous good years that we enjoyed together. Thank you. This is what the organization thinks of you. This is what some of the fans, I know there were some boos, Skip, but I'm glad they handled it in the way that they handled it. I'm glad James Harden handled it the way he did, Skip, but it went off the way I thought it would. You and I both thought he would get some boos. Some people were it's going to be harder than others to let this go because they realize what James Harden is, Skip. He's a James Hardens don't grow on trees. No. You're not getting another James Harden in the next 5 or 6, 7 drafts. That's not happening. And so when you have something like that, you want to hold on to it. But I like the way Houston handled it. I like the way James handled it. And hopefully now we can move on.
Okay. I hear you. I agree. And allow me to give an ovation to, number one, the Houston Rockets as a team for taking the utter high road here. Everything was high road. There was no low road at all last night in Houston. And also allow me to applaud James Harden for actually coming up big in a big night in Houston. And as we know, a lot of big games in Houston, he didn't come up big enough, especially in the postseason. But I thought he was great last night. He handled it beautifully.
Yeah.
It had a feel-good vibe to the whole night. And he was just utterly sensational. All of his talents, as you know, were on full display last night. His offensive genius. Shannon, in the history of this league, after all my years watching and covering this league, I've just never seen anything like this guy. And now he's even showing you his genius at distributing the basketball. He can do anything offensively with the basketball that you could ever dream of doing. He toys with the game. It's like he has the whole game on a string. If you want to double him, he's going to kick it here. If you let him in the lane, he'll go to the rim. If you let him, he'll shoot floaters. Or if you want him to, he'll just step back and shoot it right in your face, and you'll probably foul him and send him to the line for a 4-point play. It's just a phenomenal entertainment package that I'm sure was very hard for the diehard Rocket fans to sit and watch because they don't have it anymore. And I hurt for them, seriously, because that's a lot to lose. He didn't come up big enough for them in the postseason. They did get to 2 conference finals. They lost to Golden State in 5 one time, and then they lost in 7, and James came up really small in games 6 and 7 without CP3. So the point was that he played beautiful basketball last night, and it felt like bygones were let to be bygones by both sides. And I was so impressed with that. And yet, in the end, after the game, I want to quickly read you 2 quotes that caught my ear and get your response to these 2. First of all, Steve Nash was raving, obviously, about James after the game. And he said, the playmaking is obvious. He's such a brilliant distributor, playmaker, and he makes the game so easy for others and makes others better. And let me interject. I've been raving about Bruce Brown as their defensive stopper. Shannon, James is making Bruce Brown an offensive star. He's averaging over the last 6 games almost 20 a game because of James Harden. So Nash goes on to say, I knew all that. That's been no surprise. But I didn't know what his patterns of behavior were. So his leadership and professionalism and being a good teammate, all those things, he's been outstanding. So Steve Nash is saying, I didn't know who he really was on a daily basis. I didn't know how he'd be to live with in the locker room and during timeouts. And Steve Nash is saying he's been the greatest. So James echoed that by saying after the game last night, I just get credit for that now. Previously, I wasn't getting any credit. Same leadership. I've been the same person. I haven't changed not one bit. So he's saying he was that leader, that model citizen, that great teammate for all those years in Houston. I'm sorry, Shannon, I didn't see that. This is like he's turned over a new leaf in Brooklyn. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, Skip, the way they're winning, and if you look at the situation, James Harden has sacrificed this game. Now he's just not jacking up. Skip, you remember the time James Harden would be 2 or 20 from the three-point line, and he didn't care. Now he's like, you know what? Let me get some up. He's also turning Claxton. Skip, I don't know this Claxton's kid, but all I know is that he goes 7 or 8, 8 or 9, 9 or 10, just about every game, and there are lobs and dunks. But I think the thing is, Skip, it's kind of like when you see somebody from a distance, they're not in your team. It's kind of like the Tom Brady syndrome. You remember how James Harrison said, man, I want to see what this joker really like.
Yep,
man, I see this joker from a distance, from afar. Man, let me see if he really like what he portrays on TV.
Yep.
And then you get around him and you see him day to day and you see how he operates and you like, I'll be damned. He's just like that. And so James Harden, you didn't know what he was really like. And then you like, okay, you see the playmaking, Skip, the 36 points a night and the 35 points a night. Okay, we know he can score the ball. He's led the league in assists. Okay, we know he can run offense. But what type of leader is he? Is he a leader or is he one of these guys like a Kawhi, just goes and play the game? Or is he like LeBron, you know, or Kobe? Kobe was a guy that's like, come on, guys, he's in your face. LeBron is picking you up. So you're seeing all different aspects of James Harden's game. What makes him so unique, Skip? We've never, ever seen a guy that could score the ball like this, that could also pass the ball like this. You might have to go back to Pete Maravich, a guy that could score the ball, Skip, go get your 30, 40, but could get you double-digit assists. Magic could get you the assist, but Magic wasn't going to score like this. Stockton was never the scorer like this. So when you look at guys that could put the ball in the basket at a high clip like Harden, none of them could facilitate an offense and pass the ball like Harden. So he's very unique in that aspect, Skip. And I'm glad to see him getting credit because he's got a bad rep now. It's going to be very interesting to see once they start opening everything back up, because they got a lot of establishments that still closed. They only operate at like 10, 15%.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
So, so once they open up these establishments, and you have to be locked up in your hotel room, you only get out for an hour a day, we're going to see how this thing plays out. But I love what James Harden is and what he's showing and what everybody gets an opportunity to see in Houston, in Brooklyn, as opposed to what they perceived him to be in Houston.
Okay. Real quick point. I still believe your man LeBron is the best passer in basketball, but James is a close second. And when you look at James' offensive array of skills, at how deep his bag is, it's beyond LeBron's all-around ability on offense. I'm not saying James is better than LeBron, but again, James is showing you genius on offense that as a perimeter scorer, we've never seen this kind of bag or package, right?
No.
Okay,
No.
Why was it that in Houston, throughout those years, he clashed with Dwight, then he clashed with Chris Paul, and I think in the end, he clashed with his blood brother, Russell Westbrook, that they grew up together, obviously, out here in L.A. So I don't know. I can't see that he was a great leader and perfect teammate for all those years in Houston, but he has found basketball heaven in Brooklyn. And he obviously really enjoys playing with Kyrie. And in the few games they've been together, he obviously enjoys playing with KD. So you may be right. Maybe we should wait and see to see if he can close this deal through the second half of the year.
I don't know what happened with Dwight Howard. Maybe, he felt Dwight was clogging up the lane and so forth and so on. But I think with Russ and Chris Paul, Skip, you like, hold on. How you going to lead? How you going to tell somebody to do this and you showing up late for meetings? Yeah. And how you going to do something like this and you even missing meetings? So, Skip, I think that rubbed those guys the wrong way, because if you're trying to establish a culture and you're trying to win, if your best player blows off film study, if your best player is late continuously, how do you send the message that we're trying to win? Maybe they accepted, maybe they took James Harden as he is. Okay, you're going to be late? Okay, it is what it is. Yep. Okay, you're going to do this? And maybe that's how they've accepted him, and he's able to lead like that. But everybody, if you come from a structured culture, going somewhere that's unstructured, Skip, it'll rub you the wrong way.
I know. I got it. And remember, John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins blasted him on his way out of town. So
yes,
he didn't leave any good vibes in that new locker room.
Well, Skip, I've never seen a guy, James Harden plays 40 minutes a night, Skip.
Yeah.
And here's a guy, and you're like, how's he playing